The season finale in Abu Dhabi has begun. The tension has never been greater. The potential for distraction has never been greater. So, John Noble, how do we go about, where do we start unpicking fresh McLaren bias claims and a supposed team orders U-turn?
It's been quite a fascinating build-up already to this season finale, and the word, kind of the chatter in the paddock has been about team orders, probably since we arrived yesterday. Obviously, after Qatar, McLaren team boss Andreas Seller and Zach Brown CEO were very clear there will be no team orders. As long as both drivers have a mathematical chance of winning the championship, there will be no team orders. The papaya rules stay in place. That message has softened slightly since we've got here. I think the reality of what's at stake, a championship's at stake, because there are scenarios where Oscar Piastri could be required to help Lando Norris win the title. If Max Verstappen's winning, if Piastri's in third place, Norris is in fourth. If they finish like that, Max Verstappen's champion. If, however, Oscar is asked to move over and give Lando third place, Lando's champion. So these are the scenarios that the McLaren are talking about. They will keep the papaya rules in place until the moment where one of the drivers can no longer realistically win the championship, and then that radio message is coming out.
Yeah, that the main quote from Zach Brown, who we heard from in the FIA press conference today on Friday, was that it will be common sense, basically, that they apply. But the idea, the notion of them doing something on paper very different to how they've tried to go about this season hasn't gone down so well. Zach's adamant it's not a U-turn. George Russell yesterday had some quite choice words that seemed to catch a lot of people's attention.
Yeah, it's been interesting because the papaya rules have been such a talking point all season. McLaren have tried to keep things equal between both drivers. It's not gone down very well with everybody. Obviously the controversy at Monza, the question at Qatar about whether the determination to keep things equal between both cars caused them to freeze and stopped them pitting the cars for that strategy blunder. So they've come here. George Russell has said, it's ridiculous. You can't have this equality for a whole season and suddenly at the final round impose team orders. So George isn't very happy. But I think there's a reality that's hit home at McLaren. Zach Brown's talked for weeks about, we will keep our principles, and if we lose the championship like happened to McLaren in 2007, at least we come out strong. But there's a title on the line. They would be foolish to go into the final lap here in a position where one of their drivers can wins the championship, and they don't do it just because they don't want to affect these papaya rules.
Exactly, and obviously whenever anybody talks about team orders and McLaren basically trying to impose something, the likeliest scenario is that happens with Piastri being asked to help Norris, because the point situation is very much in Norris's favour. He leads Max Verstappen by 12 points, Piastri is 4 points further back. McLaren's argument is obviously this is entirely consistent with how they played the rest of this season, because as you say, they're not actually changing anything going into the weekend. They're going to try and be as fair as possible, but all of this is going to be music to Max Verstappen's ears. And I'm pretty sure Lauren Mekies, the Red Bull boss, was sat beside Zach Brown in the press conference today, and I don't know, I'm pretty sure I could see the twinges of a smile as Zach kept getting question after question on this subject. Red Bull have got a really simple task here. McLaren have the most complicated one.
I think from Red Bull's perspective, I think this is Max Verstappen's view as well, that this championship potential is a bonus. He shouldn't be here. He knows that pace of the car. McLaren should have won this championship long ago, but circumstances have played out. For Max, if this is a fifth title, it's not going to change his life immensely. And he's come into this weekend clearly playing the game. The mind games are important. And yesterday's press conference, classic example, played down the significance, said, I spent the week building up my GT3 program, sorting out my sim racing plans for next year. My parents aren't here. I don't know what they're doing.
His dad's out rallying in Africa.
And as though there was just another weekend, and you could sense that on the other side at McLaren, this is a big moment. This is a potential not only first championship for either Oscar or Lando, but it could be the only championship. We don't know how these 26 rules play out. McLaren may not be dominant again for years, so this could be their one and only shot to be world champion.
Well, what I think is really interesting, the way I would kind of distinguish between the two is McLaren are trying to talk the talk, but Max is walking the walk. He's already there. He's already in. This is another weekend for me mode. McLaren, Norris in particular, are trying to stress that point, and I thought it was really interesting. Actually, there's a good contrast to be drawn here. Zach said in the presser, trying to treat it like another weekend, but admitted, but it isn't another weekend. And I think a great example of that, you mentioned Max being so chill in that press conference yesterday, Lando just having to almost force it a little bit more in terms of how relaxed he is and how natural the situation, the weekend is, saying it's just another weekend, it won't change my life if I don't win it, which he's been building towards this moment all the time. So that's not strictly true. He's trying to obviously be process driven rather than outcome driven or objective driven. But there was a point yesterday where obviously they were saying it's just another weekend. But that FIA press conference was the only time we heard from both McLaren drivers, because McLaren has decided to do no other discretionary media this weekend and only do the mandated stuff. That doesn't sound like just another weekend to me.
Yeah, it's a step away from the normal, because there are press conferences where the drivers have to go from regulatory purposes. That's the FIA press conference, its appearances in the TV pen. Then there's optional extras they can do. So Max has a session with the Dutch media, for example. I was up at Red Bull yesterday, went to speak to Yuki Tsunoda, and we could see that session taking place, lots of Dutch people there. And normally, Lando has a session with the British kind of Fleet Street papers, British press. McLaren said, no, we're not doing that this weekend. We want them to concentrate on the race weekend. Oscar, don't know specifics of his circumstances, if he does a regular thing with the Australian press, but there would be potential to do an Australian session here if there are enough media coming. But they've been doing nothing. They want the entire focus to be on the weekend, and it is a step out of the ordinary.
And this has led to some of the more wilder claims we've heard this week, which already started strange with the notion that Piastri and McLaren's supposed bias against him managed to make its way into Australian Parliament earlier this weekend. Bit of political lazy point scoring there, just championing the national hero. But that has basically carried into this weekend. So it's been really interesting. There was a story that's done the rounds after being published on Thursday in Abu Dhabi. It's still being talked about today. It's gone like wildfire over social media of all these claims and allegations. But the very crux of the story is factually wrong, because it references Piastri being banned from speaking to Australian media, and Norris is allowed to carry out his usual briefings, and it's apparently evidence of further bias against McLaren, really making it hard for Piastri. But as we've just talked about, there's no extra media this weekend. It's not a ban, it's just they're not doing anything like that. And the example being that Norris didn't do that press briefing, which then led to Norris being accused of basically chickening out, and supposedly that shows that he's crumbling under pressure. So yeah, as much as they would like it not to be, the spotlight is so intense on them at the moment, isn't it? They can't do wrong for doing right.
I thought what was interesting was that press conference today had Jonathan Wheatley, who's the Audi team principal, who was Red Bull's sporting director, team manager during the famous 21 Abu Dhabi finale here. He talked about kind of Max and the power of Max, and he talked about the calmness that Max has that feeds through to the team. So if the team sees a driver who's not stressed, who isn't worried about things, who is totally calm and relaxed, and that team can go into the race feeling exactly the same on those circumstances. So I think how the drivers are behaving, how they're reacting, what's going on is really, really important off track. But equally, you can't forget, ultimately this battle has gone out on track, and today it looks very close.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think I probably should have said just now that it can't do right for doing wrong. I can't remember which way around I said it, but I probably got that wrong. But yes, we have had on-track action now. We've had some meaningful stuff, some substance, finally, after all the noise. On paper, very good day for Lando Norris, and looks like all of that stuff, talking the talk is also leading into walk the walk. But is it a bit closer than it looks?
I think, as most Fridays, you've got to dig into the details. That you look at the lap times at the end of the session, and you see that Lando's 3 tenths ahead. You think, well, that's easy. It's game over. Red Bull got no chance. This is Lando's championship in the bag already. We may as well go home now. But it's not like that. You've got to dig into the details of the long run. What happened today was Max did a very, very long run on the medium tyres, much longer than anybody else. So they're obviously checking the strategy, checking the tyre management. The average pace over the whole stint wasn't fantastic, but there was a radio message from Max about 3 laps before the end suggesting there was a problem with the car, the pace dropped off. If you take away those laps and then you compare his long run to Lando's long run, there's virtually nothing in it. It's 0.1 seconds. They're on a par on race runs. So this looks like it's going to be a super close fight between Lando and Max. And if they're at the front, the pressure then is on Lando, because it doesn't matter what you do. If you get it wrong 1 lap, 1 mistake, you're off. Max Verstappen there, he grabs the win, and Max takes the title.
All Max needs to be really is on the front row and give himself the chance. We haven't really talked about Piastri there. He's had a tough day. Wasn't very fast over a single lap, wasn't very fast over the long runs. He wasn't in the car in FP1. Again, that's been used by some people to question the bias and favouritism. That's just them fulfilling the rules. There are different times through the year you have to give up an FP1. This is usually one of the friendlier FP1s to give up because it's a night race or an evening race, so the daytime FP1s are relevant, the track's really dirty. Piastri didn't seem bothered about missing it. Maybe by the time we get to qualifying, he'll be lamenting that lack of track time a little bit more.